Title 42 also expires today. The pandemic-era order allowed authorities to swiftly expel migrants at U.S. land borders. And starting tonight, officials will generally deny asylum to people showing up at the Mexico border without first applying online or seeking protection in a country that they pass through. So Jorge Barón, the executive director of the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, joining us live now with more on what happens now that Title 42 is lifted. Jorge, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, so talk about Title 42 just in general. Was this a good policy?
I don't think it was a good policy. This was something that the Trump administration put in place back in 2020, and they basically used the pandemic as an excuse to do what they had wanted to do all along, which was to restrict asylum for people. And I think the fact is that this has actually led to more chaos at the border, having Title 42. So I actually think it's a good thing that the policy is ending, but I am disappointed that the Biden administration is putting additional restrictions in place for people who are seeking asylum.
Okay, right now we're looking at images from the border here. Are more people seeking asylum now, wanting to come to the States because of the policy change, or is this a pattern that we've seen previously?
I think there's one thing that's important to note is that there's always kind of seasonal patterns to when people arrive at the border. And spring has always historically, even before the Trump administration, there's always been this pattern of people coming during the spring because the winter's very cold, the summer's too hot. And so this is always a time when we see increasing numbers. Now, I do think that historically we've seen more numbers of people coming, and that's because there's been a lot of displacement in places like Latin America and other places because of the pandemic. There's been a lot of political instability in places like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti. Those are countries where we're seeing people come. And I think part of what Title 42, the problem with that was that people were not actually able to make a claim for asylum. And so some people were being expelled back to Mexico, and then they would try again. And that created the chaos. I think if we have a working system for actually assessing people's claims for asylum, we wouldn't see the kind of disruptions that we've seen at the border.
Can you explain just in general terms what the Biden administration's take is on this and what they're planning to implement?
Well, unfortunately, I think they are trying to do some good things of trying to set up places where people can actually seek protection, kind of refugee status outside of the United States. And I think that's a good thing. And they are also creating some pathways for people to be able to come here without having to make the arduous trip. But that shouldn't come at the expense of people not being able to seek asylum at the border. So those are positive steps that they're taking. But the other steps that they're taking of trying to restrict people from being able to actually seek asylum at the border, we don't think are fair, because people have the right under U.S. law, under international law, to do it. And so I think the regulation that they're enacting, I think it's probably going to get struck down by the courts, because the law is very clear that once people get to U.S. soil, they are allowed to make a claim for asylum. And we'd like to make sure that they get a chance to do that. What we need is more resources so that those claims can be processed quickly, and so that there's support so that people can actually have a meaningful way to ask for protection.
There were concerns and some reports that there would be a flood of migrants coming over the border once Title 42 expired. Any indication that that is the case or will be the case?
Well, I think certainly over the last week even we've seen that there has been an increase in numbers. I think the images that you're showing, they're true, but these are folks who are just trying to, they've heard that there's going to be a change in policy. There's a lot of confusion about what's happening. And again, because Title 42 had prevented a lot of people from seeking asylum, many of them are just simply trying to show up and say, look, I'm afraid for my life in my country. I'd like to make a claim. So this is, you can see that there's some cases where people are just, making up the line to try to make their claim. And what we just need is the federal government to have more resources to be able to make a meaningful assessment of whether those folks are entitled to protection.
Jorge Barón with the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill.